Okay, we're back. This is video number 2 of 4. Now that you have gone through the steps to upload the Form 1023 Application for Recognition of Exemption, you should be looking at the application that is on my screen, on your screen. The first few pages of the application just provides updates on what has changed over the years regarding this application. I would advise you to read each page. I'm going to go ahead and go down to page 4 where the actual application begins. And this is the Form 1023 Application for Recognition of Exemption under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Once again, if you would please have your instructions for Form 1023 on the desk or on the table wherever you are working beside you as we complete this application together. The instructions provide detailed information regarding each question in this application. I do not elaborate on the questions in the application to the extent that the instructions do. So it's very important for you to have the instructions nearby as we go through this application. Again, this is video number 2 of 4, and in this video we are going to cover parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 of this application. So let's get started. To make the application process, or to make this learning experience easier, I decided to go ahead and complete the application for you with information, and this is just sample information, it's not real information, but with information so that you can actually see how your information will look in the application, and also to demonstrate how you should answer the questions throughout. Part 1 is identification of applicant. In this section, you will identify what the name of your organization is. So let's just go through each question one by one. Your instructions will elaborate on the different questions. So part 1, identification of applicant. Number 1, full name of the organization, exactly as it appears in your organizing document. So whatever the name of your organization is, you would type it here. And then number 2, the name of the person that this organization is in care of. So in this instance, the name of the organization is Youth Computer Literacy Services Incorporated, and the person that's in charge of this organization is Mr. James Bond. Number 3 is the mailing address, so you key your mailing address wherever the organization is going to operate from. If you're going to operate your organization from your home, then you will put your home mailing address here. The employer identification number, or EIN, this is a number that you have already received or applied to receive from the Internal Revenue Service. You will put that number there. Some people also call it the federal identification number. The city or town, state or country, and zip +4. You would put whatever that is, whatever city you're operating out of, the state or country, and your zip code. Number 5, the annual accounting period. What accounting period are you going to use? If you're going to use the typical calendar year as your accounting period, then you would put December, and you'll put the number 12 in parentheses to let the person know that's processing your application that you are going to use the typical calendar year as your fiscal year or as your accounting period. Number 6, the primary contact. Who's going to be the primary contact for this organization? And more than likely it's going to be the same person you listed in number 2, Mr. James Bond. And more than likely he is the executive director of this organization. And 6B is for your telephone number, or for the person that's responsible for this organization. They will put their telephone number here. 6C is a fax number. If you have a fax number, you would type that fax number here. If you don't, you can leave it blank, or if you prefer, you can type not applicable. So that's the first 6 questions under the Part 1, Identification of Applicant. We're going to move down, and we're going to go to the remaining questions on this page. Number 7, are you represented by an authorized representative, such as an attorney or accountant? Now, if your organization is being represented for whatever reason by an authorized representative, an attorney, or an accountant, you would put yes here, and then you would provide documentation to explain the reason why you are being represented. More than likely, you're not being represented, so you would check no. As you can see, I've already checked no, because the majority of the people that I work with do not have anyone representing them. So the answer is no. 8, was a person who is not one of your officers, directors, trustees, employees, or an authorized representative listed in line 7, paid a promised payment, and so on and so forth. Not even going to read that full question, because if you answered no in 7, then the answer in 8 would also be no. 9A, organization's website. If you've already decided on a website, or if you've already established a website for this organization, you would type the organization's website address here in 9A. If you have an email address already established for the organization, you would write or type the email address under section 9B. 10. Certain organizations are not required to file an information return, which is also the Form 990 or Form 990EZ. If you are granted tax exemption, are you claiming to be excused from the filing of 990 or filing of Form 990EZ? Well, the answer there, I'm just going to tell you, should be no, because every 501c3 nonprofit organization is required to file a Form 990 or Form 990EZ during the reporting period of each year. So the reporting period is 5 months and 15 days after the end of your fiscal year. So if your fiscal year ends December the 31st, then you're supposed to submit your 990 or your 990EZ to the Internal Revenue Service by May 15th of the next year. Number 11, the date of incorporation, if you are a corporation. So you are going to be a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, so you should, once you submit your articles of incorporation to the Secretary of State office, then the Secretary of State office will send you your articles back with a stamp on them to state that they have been approved. And the date that's listed on that stamp is the date that you would put in number 11 here. So in video number 1, I talked about that when we talked about the articles of incorporation. So whatever the date is on your stamped approved articles that you receive back from the Secretary of State's office, you would type that here. So in this case, their articles of incorporation were approved on February the 25th, 2015. Number 12, were you formed under the laws of a foreign country? Most of the people, well, all of the people that I've worked with so far answered no for this question. But if you are formed under the laws of a foreign country, you would put yes, and then you would state the country. So that's the first page of the application. Let's keep going. The next page, Part 2. Part 2 is the organizational structure. And under this Part 2, it states you must be a corporation, including a limited liability company, an unincorporated association, or a trust to be tax exempt. Do not file this form unless you can check yes on lines 1, 2, 3, or 4. So do not complete this application unless you can check yes on lines 1, 2, 3, or 4. So, number 1, are you a corporation? If yes, attach a copy of your articles of incorporation showing certification of filing with the appropriate state agency. Include copies of any amendments to your articles and be sure they also show state filing certification. That goes back to what we just talked about. You are a corporation if you have received your articles back from the Secretary of State's office with the approval stamp on it with a date. Now, the approval stamp is the same thing that the approval stamp, the approval stamp is showing certification of filing. So that is what this question is referring to. So you would put yes. And then you remember to include those articles in your application. So I would suggest that you go ahead and get those articles and put them face down on a table or desk or wherever you're working so that you will have those in the correct order in which they should appear in your application. 2, 3, and 4, and 4A and 4B should be no. Now, again, I'm not going to elaborate on why they should be no because I'm basing this on the majority of all of the applications that I've completed for people, and they're always no. But I want you to read each of these questions. And if these questions do apply to your organization, then you need to follow the instructions on how to answer these questions. But just go ahead and put no for 2, 3, 4, and 4B. That takes us to number 5. Have you adopted bylaws? And the answer to that question is yes. We have adopted bylaws. If you remember back in video 1, I went through all of the attachments that are required to be a part of this application, and the bylaws are one of the bylaws represent one of the attachments that has to be included in this application. So you would include those. So you would just take the bylaws that you've already written and put them face down and click on yes here. So that's part 2, the organizational structure. Part 3, moving on along, require provisions in your organizing document. Now, the following questions are designed to ensure that when you file this application, your organizing document contains the required provisions to meet the organizational test under Section 501c3. Unless you can check the boxes in both lines 1 and 2, your organizing document does not meet the organizational test. Do not file this application until you have amended your organizing document. Submit your original and amended organizing documents showing state filing certification if you are a corporation or an LLC with your application. So let's read these questions because we have to be able to check the boxes in both lines 1 and 2. Number 1, Section 501c3 requires that your organizing documents state your exempt purposes, such as charitable, religious, educational, and/or scientific. So, your organization must be either a charitable organization, a religious organization, an educational organization, or a scientific organization. Check the box to confirm that your organizing document meets this requirement. And then, after you check the box, describe specifically where your organizing document meets this requirement, such as a reference to a particular article or section in your organizing document. What is your organizing document? Your organizing document is your articles of incorporation. So, if you need to prove that your organization meets these requirements, you put a check mark here, and then you go to the section here that says page 1, article 2, paragraph 2. That's telling the representative that's reviewing your application that if you go to my articles of incorporation that's included in this application packet, and you go to page 1 and you look at article 2, and then you go to paragraph 2 under article 2, you will see where I specifically indicate what type of organization this is and that it meets the exempt purposes. 2A. Section 501c3 requires that upon dissolution of your organization, your remaining assets must be used exclusively for exempt purposes, such as charitable, religious, educational, and/or scientific. Check the box on line 2A to confirm that your organizing document meets this requirement by express provision for the distribution of assets upon dissolution. If you rely on state law for your dissolution provision, do not check the box on line 2A and go to line 2C. So, what this means is, if you decide one day that you're going to dissolve your nonprofit organization, you are promising the IRS that you're not going to sell your assets. You're going to instead donate those assets to other nonprofit organizations that meet the exempt purposes that are listed here. So you want to check the box indicating that you are going to do that if your organization is dissolved. And you want to refer the representative reading your application to the exact location in your articles of incorporation where you stipulate that you are going to donate your assets upon dissolution to an organization that meet the exempt purposes. So we're stating here that if you look at my articles of incorporation, page 11, article 12, paragraph 1 is where I stipulate how we are going to dissolve our assets if the organization is ended. So we don't need to use 2C because we're not using state laws to do this. We're just going to do it through our articles of incorporation. And so you can leave 2C blank. The fourth component, or the fourth part of the IRS Form 1023 application for recognition of exemption is your narrative description of activities. And this is the last part that we're going to talk about on this video number 2. So, using an attachment, describe your past, present, and planned activities in a narrative. If you believe you have already provided some of this information in response to other parts of this application, you may summarize that information here and refer to the specific parts of the application for supporting details. You may also attach copies of newsletters, brochures, or similar documents for supporting details to this narrative. Remember that if this application is approved, it will be open for public inspection. Therefore, your narrative description of activities should be thorough and accurate. Refer to the instructions for information that must be included in your description. So here is where you would indicate your past activities, what you've already done through your nonprofit organization, your present activities, what you are currently doing through your nonprofit organization, and your planned activities, what you plan to do in the future through your nonprofit organization. And this needs to be included in an attachment to the application. So your past, present, and planned activities. We have concluded with the 4 parts of the application that's a part of video number 2. So now we want to take time for you to go ahead and complete your application using the information that we've already learned